Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Album of the Year, 1989. 80s coming to a close. Soon to come into the 90s, which for me, not a very good decade for music, though some very good releases. I think overall, we started to see a shift into a lot of different styles and things in popular music. Grunge and alternative and pop and rap kind of reigning supreme with that throughout the 90s. But we're not quite there yet. We'll talk about that more as we kind of move on here. Now we're in the last year of the 80s, 1989. A couple of really good ones here for me. A lot of really good ones for me. But, this for me, just a little history on the musical life of Mr. Pardo here. As the 80s wound down, I was big into, thrash metal and just good old-fashioned classic metal and hard rock, as I was throughout the decade. The beginning of the 90s started my shift into, I really heavily got into progressive rock and jazz fusion. Even more so. Always liked both of those genres, but I started to move away from metal a little bit because, grunge and alternative all of a sudden became really popular in the early 90s. A lot of the metal bands were starting to do different things to kind of keep up with the times, and, a lot of the real heavy stuff started to creep into the underground. I started to kind of deviate a little bit from metal throughout the majority of the 90s, till like the late 90s. I got back into metal like 97, 98 or so. But for a bunch of years, I was listening to nothing but like prog rock, prog metal, and jazz fusion. But we'll get there. 1989, back to 89. So, I think a one clear winner, and then a very tough decision for my runner-up, which I'm going to cheat a little bit today. Hey, it's my show. I can do what I want, right? I'm going to pull a mulligan every now and then, just because I have a couple here that I could not distinguish between there's three of them, actually, and I wanted to give them all some love today. So, my number one, released December 1st, 1989, right at the tail end of the year, produced by Paul O'Neill for Atlantic Records. Sabotage, Gutter Ballet. Man, I listened to this a ton. I was still, when this came out, I was still riding high from Hall of the Mountain King 2 years prior. And then this came out, and maybe not quite as heavy a record, but definitely more kind of theatrical and progressive by far. A lot more keyboards and piano used on this album. This would signal kind of the shift to that much more kind of symphonic sound that Sabotage would have for pretty much the remainder of their career. Some of my favorite Sabotage songs are on this album. Of Rage and War, killer heavy opener, right? Then the majestic, powerful title track. If you watch the Top 10 Song show that I did with Chris Caffrey recently, you'll notice that you'll remember that a lot of the songs in my top 10, or a few of them anyway, were nestled here on this particular album. I love this album a lot. Then you've got the Temptation Revelation instrumental, all right, When the Crowds Are Gone, which is, probably the first song that signaled a trend that we would see on a lot of their albums, these real kind of emotional, gutsy, power metal ballads that really, really work. Very different from what a lot of the bands were doing at the time. Silk and Steel, another instrumental. Chris Oliva's guitar work, absolutely impeccable. What a great player, taken from us way too soon. What else we got? She's in Love, another raging heavy rocker with some tremendous guitar riffing and soloing. Then the back end of the album, man, for me is just absolutely killer. Hounds. If you remember, that was my number 2 favorite track of all time from Sabotage. The Unholy, another top track. Love Hounds and Unholy. They're both so menacing, dark, just booming with intensity. Mentally Yours, another grinding heavy rocker. Summer's Rain, more emotional stuff there. And then Thorazine Shuffle, which again has killer riffs, just a real grinding, heavy classic metal song. And the vocals of John Oliva, outstanding as always. For me, really hard to top John Oliva's vocals from this kind of period. Their first kind of 5 albums, right? Six albums, until Zach came into the band. For me, Oliva was one of the best metal vocalists. Definitely a top 5 guy. It's a shame that he, kind of took off for a number of years, and before he came back to singing a little bit again with the band and with John Oliva's Pain. And but what a tremendous, tremendous singer in his heyday. Unbelievable. All right, so runner-up, like I said, I'm going to cheat a little today because I originally had my runner-up all set to go, and then I had 2 other releases that I'm like, oh man, how can I not include them somehow? Because all 3 of these albums are just really, really important to me. 2 of them mainstays in my listening repertoire since the day each one came out. Another one I also was really into when it first came out, then kind of drifted away from the band for many, many years, and in the last handful of years have really gotten back into them and realized just how much I love them and this album. So that particular band I'm talking about is Tesla. All right. Of course, you gotta have the great Radio Controversy, right? So many great songs on here. And just, Tesla early in their career, man. Whew. Killer stuff. Just a great, great hard rock band. It's like, for me, Tesla is kind of like the band that I always wished Aerosmith would have morphed into in the 80s rather than become kind of like a hit machine. I think Tesla had that little bluesy, raunchy background, man. They had that metallic metal edge to them. They had great vocals, killer dual guitar riffing and soloing going on, and absolutely drop-dead memorable songwriting skills. So many great, memorable songs on this album, their first album, the next album. I mean, like Tesla's their first handful of albums are just amazing. Amazing. All right, the other 2 for me always kind of went hand in hand. I don't know why. Self-titled from Badlands and the self-titled from Blue Murder. I mean, these 2, for me, they've always gone hand in hand. I don't know why, because they came out right around the same time. They both feature a guitar player, who came from a really, really big band. So, we got John Sykes came from Whitesnake with his boss David Coverdale. You got Jakey Lee came from Ozzy's band with his boss Ozzy Osbourne. And you got notable players in each band who played with other guys, other bands and what have you. And I think both of these debuts just knocked it out of the park. Knocked it out of the park. In the case of Whitesnake and Blue Murder, you got Sykes, singing at the microphone, playing the guitar. You got Tony Franklin and Carmine Appice, and just the songs are epic, big, hook-laden, guitar-heavy rock songs, right? Is it metal? Is it hard rock? Is it a combination of both? Sure. And here on the Badlands album, you've just got, you got Ray Gillen on vocals. I mean, just killing it. And also managed and produced by Paul O'Neill. So there's kind of like a, little bit of connection to the Savatage album. Here, it's just great 70s style bluesy heavy rock. Jakey Lee totally showing a different side to his playing. Man, High Wire, Dreams in the Dark, Winter's Call. So many great songs on here. Same thing with the Blue Murder. I mean, I just could not leave any one of these 3 out. So you got them all today, right? But of course, my number 1 pick is Gutter Ballet by Savatage. You know how it goes, guys. In the comments below, want to see your pick or picks of favorites from 1989, because things are about to change. Tomorrow starts 1990. All of a sudden, you're probably going to start seeing. I'm just kind of throwing it out there now. You're going to start seeing a lot of progressive rock stuff, and probably even some jazz or jazz fusion kind of showing up, at least in the first half of the 90s. You might see some metal too, because let's not forget the 90s. Even though maybe I wasn't personally listening to a lot of metal in the 90s, I have since gone back and listened to a lot of metal from the 90s. So you got a lot of really great death and black metal that came out in the early mid 90s. So it'd be interesting to see because I haven't gone through any of the years yet. But it'll be interesting to see. I think I have this preconceived notion in my head that I'm going to be picking a lot of prog and jazz for the next few years, but I might be going back and saying, hey, but wait a second. that Norwegian black metal album. But wait a second, that Florida death metal album. Wait a second, that kick-ass progressive metal album from Germany. Ooh, so again, start thinking about all the bands that were, kind of really starting to happen right around that time. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I know a lot of people out there who have been kind of following along with this daily show and commenting and saying, oh yeah, after the 70s and the first part of the 80s, it's getting tough for me because I really wasn't listening to much new stuff and yada, yada, yada. I get all that. But actually does not mean that there wasn't really good music being released. Just not as much of the classic, iconic stuff that we all remember growing up. So for all you younger folks, I'm sure you're going to be like, the 90s were great. All right. All of us older guys are going to be like, yeah, this is a little more of a challenge. But for me, I think once I just start looking at kind of the list and remembering, oh, yeah, that came out in 92. Oh, yeah, 94. That's right. Forgot about that one. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. Coming up, we've got our second rant recorded the other night with the Seibert brothers, Craig and George. That is coming up momentarily, so stay tuned for that. And then tonight, I am talking one-on-one with Andy Powell from Wishbone Ash. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to that. That'll be great. We're going to talk about the new Wishbone Ash album, their career, Andy's thoughts on, what's going to happen with live music going forward, all sorts of stuff. You don't want to miss that. Hopefully that'll be the first of many upcoming kind of like interview type of segments that we're going to be doing. So I'm going to be trying to focus quite a bit on that going forward. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So guys, I'll see you real soon. Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.